All right, folks. Welcome to Tim and Tim at 10. And if you notice, it's just Tim at 10 right now. So hope everybody's having a good morning. Uh, Vitali is supposed to be here a little bit later. He is currently working on a tax situation for us. Funny enough, we talked about taxes last week, and here he is working on taxes. So, anyway, guys, I hope you guys are having an awesome Tuesday. Hope you guys are getting yourselves ready for 2024 and that you're working on some pretty cool stuff to close out the year and get ready for the new year. I know Tim and I are. We're closing out some deals that we hope to be sharing some positive news on here in the next couple of weeks, and setting up, quite frankly, guys, like a pretty damn strong pipeline for 2024. I keep hearing all these folks talk about no deals, no deals. There's plenty of deals out there. That being said, that's not the topics today. Today, we wanted to talk about oversupply. And before everybody loses their mind, because I've been posting for, I don't know, 2 years about undersupply, let's kind of keep it in perspective on what we're talking about. So, over the last couple of weeks, I've had a number of conversations with brokers, with other buyers, with lenders, and even a few builders about markets, not just North and South Carolina, uh, Oklahoma, some of those markets. Kansas City, Missouri is one that I've heard quite a bit about and had some discussions about for multiple reasons. One, cause I am invested there as a passive investor, quite frankly. And then some other places like down in Mississippi and Florida, and then the Columbia, South Carolina market. And hang on, folks. I think we have someone joining us.
Hey there.
There he is.
I'm
There he
fashionably
is.
late. Did you do
Yeah.
my favorite intro? Happy birthday, Dennis Russell. I saw that on Facebook this morning.
I did not do your favorite intro because I'm me and I'm much more subdued. But anyway, so Tim, we're talking about oversupply, right? And I fully went ahead and acknowledged we've been talking about undersupply for 2 years. And I think we're going to kind of talk about the fact that they're not necessarily the same thing, even though we're talking about, I don't know, multifamily housing, apartments. So kind of talking about the same thing. So folks, anyway, what I was saying was I've had a lot of conversations recently, and so people are starting to talk about oversupply, units coming online, things like that. So I'm going to use Charlotte, North Carolina as example because that's where I am. I own some stuff in Charlotte, Tim and I do. And one of the conversations we've been having with one of our property managers in the area is we're having trouble leasing. We're having trouble leasing. The market is softening. Some of that, guys, by the way, is just the time of the year. November, December, January can be tough times to lease units. The sweet spot for us, at least, tends to be like April through August and September. That tends to be when we see our highest level of traffic, which makes some sense, right? Like in the housing market, you see a lot of sales that happen in that time of year as well. Kids are out of school, all that good stuff. Anyway, so what we're seeing in the Charlotte market is we are seeing more vacancies online. I think looked yesterday. I think Charlotte's at like 8.6% vacancy right now, which doesn't sound awful, but Charlotte typically sits like 3-4% vacancy, right? And when you consider the size of the Charlotte market, an extra 4% vacant, that's quite a few units.
I think a lot of it was though because there were so many construction starts in
Exactly.
2021, in 2022. They take, a good build depending on the size of the property, right? But there's A-class properties going in here in Wilmington that are 300-400 units, and they take every bit of 18 months to 2 years to build. So if you started in 2021 when everything is booming and it's hot and the rates are low, you're just starting to see all those units come online from 2 years ago. So it's a lag indicator. The overall vacancy is a lag indicator because of the units that have come online. But here's my prediction is that with the costs that had gone up during COVID and during inflation, with the rising in the interest rates, with the fluctuating of material and labor costs, that there have not been as many starts over the last 12 months. So,
Right.
12 months from now or 24 months from now, you're going to start to see that squeeze again, because it's not like a steady flow of units coming online. It like spikes and then it drops and then it spikes and it
Well,
drops because of the fluctuations of what's going on in the economy.
yeah, and what Tim's talking about there is actually getting to the point of what we're seeing is even with an oversupply right now, there is still an undersupply of units in the Charlotte market. So keep this in mind. At the beginning of 2023, it was estimated that Charlotte was 32,000 units short. Okay. Um, that's always over a projection of time, right? Charlotte's growth over the next X months is supposed to be this. Here's how many units we need to fill, that growth and address the current demand in the market. And the current inventory that is coming along online is somewhere around 11,000 units. So if you think about that, we're 32,000 short, 11,000 are coming online. And then it comes back to what Vitali's talking about is all those units started around 2021 and 2022. They're all coming online like in this 3-month window, right?
Hmm.
No matter what your growth is, you only have so much demand in a given window, right? Like your yearly demand is different than December's demand, right? So you got all these units coming online in December, January, February, and there's only so many renters out there during those months looking for places to live, right? So you got this huge glut of 11,000 units coming online. I don't know what the exact number is, but that's the number of units that are being delivered over a period of time. But maybe there's only like 5,000 renters in that window looking for places to live right now.
So what you're saying is it's a good time to be a renter in December and January.
Yeah, well, and
I'm getting
it's
that
a
new
bad,
Class A unit with concessions, baby.
and there's the key, right? Because what you're seeing, because typically, right, what people talk about is in a recession, which I think we could all argue that we may or may not be in one. I think a lot of indicators are that we are not. But during a recession, people always say, "Oh, I want to own B and C class because A class tends to suffer in the recession," right? So because when people are cutting back, they give up the ultra luxury apartment, they move down to like an A minus or a B plus. B plus moves down to C, that kind of thing. And so, it's typically like, hey, I want the affordable. I want the C or the B minus property, if I'm a landlord. Well, what we're seeing right now, because of what Vitali just said, those concessions, right? All of a sudden, people who were renting Bs, right, are like, wait a minute, I can rent an A with concessions for the next year for the same thing I can get B, and look at all these amenities I get, right? So they're moving into A. And what we're seeing in the B class market is they're like, well, shit, now I got vacancy, right?
Hmm.
So the B class are offering concessions, and folks that typically live in C units are like, I can move up. I can level up a little bit for the next year or so, and they're moving up. So you're seeing some softening all the way across the board. And what I'm here to tell you is this is not a sign that we have a long-term oversupply. This is a point in time problem.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, one of my favorite brokers in the Charlotte area and I sat down a couple weeks ago, and he showed me some data. And I'm not going to share all his data because he's the one who put the effort into that, and it's just not my place to do that. But one of the things that we saw was based on his data and when the supply is coming based on, and then versus the growth, it's like a 6-month window of something you got to manage through. And then later in 2024 into 2025, it just skyrockets again in terms of rent rates, appreciation, to the tune of a place in Charlotte that Tim and I like quite a bit. Like over the next 18 to 24 months, we're talking 23% plus appreciation and demand for rental units.
What's that? What's that saying we've been hearing a lot of? Survive to 25.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's just kind of the data backs up that statement, which is pretty incredible to see. I think
And
he made
this,
a newsletter on that, right?
who did?
The
Oh,
broker that you're talking about.
yeah, he did. He did. So
Probably send people to his newsletter.
if
I can't remember. I have to get the what the link is and post it there, but I'll get
yeah,
it from him.
yeah. So guys, like, don't. And here's the crazy thing, like that. But of course, the headlines, like we always talk about, the headlines are like, you know, market softening, real estate's crashing, blah blah blah, all this other stuff. It's like, no, it's not. We still have an undersupply across the board in this country.
But
Um,
I was going to
and
say a
and
lot of it's regional, though. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
obviously, if you're buying in, I hate to use this because I feel like it's the butt of a lot of jokes, but like, Flint, Michigan was kind of beat up for a long period of time. If you're still building new development in Flint, Michigan with a declining population, you're probably going to have a really bad time.
right,
But when you're talking local markets for Tim and Tim in North Carolina, South Carolina, um, they're experiencing such rapid growth of population and job increases.
yeah,
Raleigh, Charlotte, Asheville, Boone, Wilmington. My goodness, Wilmington is off the charts growing right now. It's insane. So it's just you got to be careful with where you're investing into your markets and having an understanding of this data so that you don't make rash decisions in a time of difficulty, right?
yeah,
Because if the data supports it and you can show and you can feel what's happening, then that's kind of the glory of real estate, right? Is being able to sit it out and wait.
yeah,
It's buy low, sell high. You don't want to sell right now if you don't have to, because this would be the definition of selling low when things are kind of difficult. You're seeing any kind of little slowdown. Interest rates are at their highest. Insurance rates are at their highest. Now's the worst time to sell a property, in my opinion. But if you
yeah,
have to sell it, you have to sell it. No big deal.
yeah. And one of the things that I don't want to be, by the way, is I don't want to be one of those guys. I don't want to be in the A class space with ultra luxury right now in the Charlotte market, because when these concessions burn off, these tenants are going to be looking for, places to live. And, who knows how long these guys are going to have to be making deals on their rents. And they're the same way all of us are, right? They can only make concessions for so long, right? They have projections they got to hit. They can only weather it for so long, or they're in trouble. And, where Tim and I play, we preach affordability, affordability, affordability. Well, here's the one thing that Charlotte still has today that this delivery of new properties is not addressing it, and that's the affordability problem for renters in Charlotte, North Carolina. This does nothing to address that, nothing. Um, because at the end of the day, you're still not talking, even with the concessions. You're talking about like, hey, so I went from 2,800 a month to 1,900 a month, right? Like, maybe. This does not address affordability problems.
Mm-mm.
And where Tim and I play is squarely in the affordable place space. And we are seeing a little bit of a slowdown right now, but this is short term. This is absolutely short term.
One thing that I love about playing in the affordability Section 8 LIHTC space is we gotten fair market rents for a lot of our properties. And one property in specific, the rents went up over $100 across the board.
Right.
$100 increases. It's more than a 10% increase on those units.
Yeah.
And we're in a recession, we're in bad times, we're this, we're that. And we model our deals to go 3% year over year, maybe 4% year over year increases. But over the last year we saw a 17% increase on one of our properties in South Carolina. This year we saw a 10% increase.
Yeah. When
Now you're at year 5 numbers already in your pro forma, but it's not as pretty of a tenant basis. It's not as pretty of a property potentially, right? I mean, we do a lot of renovations, and the guy we buy our properties from does a ton of Class A renovations. So, trying to break the stigma there of what affordable housing looks like.
Yeah. And Tim, to your point, hey, guess what the majority of these 11,000 units, new deliveries, aren't taking?
LIHTC
Right.
Section 8 vouchers, man.
Right.
That's dude, the news lines and the headlines always talk about Class A product.
Yeah.
Even the broker we were discussing before, when he sent us the rough draft of his stuff, he was talking more about the sales side of things where I picked it up and I was like, dude, you're talking about Class A product selling for $290 a door. Like Tim and I have never paid $290 a door for anything. I was like, this newsletter is not impactful because you're only targeting a very small percentage of people that buy Class A product for $300,000 a door.
Right.
Like the majority of investors, at least in our world, are buying in the 100 to $150,000 per unit range, and this newsletter doesn't serve them at all because it's
Yeah.
it's only targeted towards Class A product. And all the new development stuff, it's very, actually, how much of of those 11,000 units are Tech, right? Because they don't accept vouchers, but they're income restricted. Probably none,
Yeah, my guess is not many, if any,
right?
because most of what we've been seeing developed over the last few years has not really been in that space.
Yeah. I know it's very
Especially,
difficult. One of the local GoBundance guys here in Wilmington, he's been working to become a Tech developer, and it's a
yeah,
very closely guarded secret, much like development is to begin with. And he's
yeah,
like, it's not something like he was offering to go do a job for somebody in order to learn how it works so that he can do it in the future himself. And it was
yeah.
like, wow,
It's funny.
he's very successful, and those principles of trying to get into the first deal are still the same. Doesn't matter if you've never done a deal or you've been doing deals for 30 years and you're trying to get into a new class or new type or new whatever.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I had a conversation with a guy probably a year and a half ago now, and he was out of Virginia, and I was talking to him, and he was a Litech developer, or
Mhm.
sorry, he owned a GC company or a construction company, and they had an entire arm of their company that was focused on Litech development.
Mhm. Yeah.
And one of the things I was talking to about him, I was like, man, you don't run across a lot of you guys, like, or it's not easy to run across a lot of you guys. And he was like, it's not something that a lot of people do, and those of us who do, it's not easy to find the information on it.
Right.
So to your point, it's almost like it's a closely guarded fraternity or something. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Um,
Right. I
but
mean, but that, I attribute a lot of our success to being able to niche down on something that is a closely guarded secret. You
yeah,
you find out what is the saying? It's like when everybody's running to something, you run when everyone's zigging, you zag, right? And everyone's buying market rate properties at Class A rents and blah 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 blah, whatever. You got to look at where are people not buying stuff? What is people thinking that's not attractive? How do I make money and opportunity in those spaces?
yeah. Hey, so Michael, good question or good comment. I am so keep in mind, Tim and I are not developers, but I am not aware of a mandatory set aside in the Charlotte area. I know there are tend to be tax incentives for developers who will agree to a set aside, but I don't believe there's a mandatory requirement for it.
Hmm.
Um, I've heard a number of things because Charlotte's been doing this affordability crisis thing for I don't know years upon years upon years, and I know once a year, local news gets on their kick to go out and talk about it again. And and they, I mean, man, I can remember those things happening, 10, 12 years ago. But and I know they've talked about, things maybe the government needs to do to make it mandatory, but I don't believe it's ever happened here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good comment for sure.
Yeah, and North and South Carolina tends to be, and again, guys, I don't want to get into red versus blue or any of that good stuff. But North Carolina, South Carolina tends to be a little bit more on the red side in terms of politics, and you know, uh, just in all obvious. If I'm calling out something you don't know, tell me. But folks states on the West Coast tend to be a little more blue. I think it would be a little hard to pass some sort of mandatory piece like that here in the Carolinas, at least in the near future. Um,
Yeah, I don't like the word mandatory, right? Because that business model doesn't fit for everybody. And
right,
I think that there's a imbalance at that point where if there is an incentive to do a 20 or 30% set aside, there should be an incentive that benefits somebody that makes them want to do it, right?
right.
And forcing somebody to do something is just, I don't know, it's controlling, and I don't really like that side of things. I just feel like the reward or like the incentivization to do something like that is not good enough to make it worth anybody's time. So that's why people aren't doing it right now. Would you disagree? I mean, I feel like there should be some good incentives in order to do this. That benefit the society, but also benefit your bottom line because of the impact that you're making.
Yeah, I think what we've seen, at least in the Charlotte market, is you're right. The incentives aren't over the last few years. The incentives have not outweighed other opportunity, right?
Right. That's a good way to
So
say it.
like in the Charlotte market, for instance, you could build something and go down and, you know, why am I incentivized to get some sort of like tax abatement, 10, 20, 30% tax abatement when if I can keep, every one of my units at fair market, I'm getting 3,000, 3,200, 35, $4,000 rents, right? And like, but wait, if I got to go put 20 or 30% of those at 1,500, well, I'm losing 2,500, 30, or 1,500 to 2,500 a unit.
Mhm.
It takes a pretty serious tax write off to make up that income loss,
Oh,
right?
look at this. Who's Facebook use? I feel like this might be Tony. If you wanted to
Is it?
build new, Wilmington will assist you with financing for new development, but they don't require it. For example, if you gave 10 to 20% set aside for affordable housing, they would give you 90% LTV and 0% interest of a
Yeah.
15-year hold. So that's the incentive you would see here locally. Oh man, that is super. That's really enticing because, okay, we talk about I'm kind of going through this on a personal side of things, just kind of bring this into relation for everybody paying attention. Is I'm working with an asset protection team and they're talking about revocable and irrevocable trusts and all that kind of stuff. Later on in my life, when I'm buying legacy assets that I'm going to put into an irrevocable trust, this is exactly what I would do. I would do something that has 90% leverage, 0% interest, 15-year hold because I wouldn't be interested in selling it. And then if I pass away or if I'm in my 80s or whatever, I can then sell it 15 years later after having an amazing run of appreciation and redeploy it into another asset of the same kind in the same area because it's irrevocable trust. So you can't take the money out of the trust, right? So it benefits you to keep everything in the trust, right, for tax purposes and asset protection and all that kind of stuff. But that's really, really incredible. That's really interesting stat right there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I'd be curious, Facebook user who we think is Tony. Um, does that also come with some sort of tax abatement, tax incentive as well? I mean, not that the loan program's not sexy enough.
Yeah,
That's pretty.
when you're paying 8% right now, 7 to 8% for rates right now, and you're
Yeah,
talking 0% with 90% leverage.
yeah, yeah,
Ooh,
for sure, for sure.
even making a 5 to 7% return instead of a 10 to 15% return, that's super attractive.
Yeah, for sure. Um, because like what we're kind of talking about here is like don't don't look at these deliveries. Absorption rates are different than oversupply. And when things all come online, it takes longer to absorb. You think about water in a drain, right? Like a little bit of water goes down fast, a lot of water takes a little more time, right? So you know, and so think about it like that. What we're seeing is we're seeing a lot hitting the market all at once. And
Mhm.
there's going to be some concessions that take place because of that. But like Tim mentioned, there's a couple of factors at play. Housing starts have slowed significantly. And as we all know, that takes a lot of time to to address. You don't build anything in 2023. Well, you don't just all of a sudden start in 2024 and boom, you got new houses, right? It
Mhm.
takes years, years. So anything that's coming online now, it's going to get absorbed. The growth in Charlotte hasn't slowed, folks, and it's going to get absorbed. It's going to be used up. These concessions will burn off, and the fact that we don't have any real new starts to speak of is going to be we're going to be back here with an undersupply at any given time and in the near future. um
Yeah, and that's one thing that I was talking. I mean, to your point about it takes years for these things to happen. Oh, the process of getting raw land, getting it in, surveyed, and then getting it entitled, and then getting it shovel ready can take 2 years or something like that, right? Two, three
yeah.
years. But one of the other feedbacks that I've gotten from Tony, because he's in the development space, is that there's a lot of developers that are just not buying land anymore. They're just sitting on it, right? They're sitting on entitled land waiting for prices to come back down to reset so that they can sign new contracts with developers instead of, in order to get their costs down. That's the only way to kind of break the cycle of where they're paying prices today versus where they are tomorrow. And that's sitting on the land and waiting a little bit. And so Facebook user that was talking about the Wilmington, new development stuff is a friend of mine, Alex McKinney. Good to see you, Alex. Thanks for joining. But yeah, exactly what I was just talking about. So generational family money is being built here on 90% leverage and 0% interest. I'm not at that point yet, but 15, 20 years from now, maybe that's something I'm going to be looking at. But that's really, really enticing for legacy long-term assets that you're putting into an irrevocable trust that you can pass down to your heirs, that they'll have something to inherit and live off of, and blah 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 blah, all that stuff, right? So there's really great programs out there in order to incentivize development, incentivize affordable housing, incentivize just the growth of an area, which is really, really remarkable stuff.
Yeah.
And the more
Yeah.
the more you can use it to your benefit.
Yeah, for sure. So, guys, I think I just want to caution you against, taking any data point and applying it to a peanut butter spread approach, right? Like really look into it. And I'll give the broker, just mention his name. Well, I'll give Kyle credit, because Kyle did really dive into it, and he took the data,
Oh,
today's data, and he spread it out over like an 18 24-month period. And what you see is you see a lot of red in the near term, and you see a ton of green, 6 to 12 months and 18 months out. And you gotta take that kind of approach, because again, guys, like I think we all lost sight of it in 2021, 22. Real estate's a long game.
oh
It is
yeah.
a long game.
You can actually so Kyle Chase, his website is K for Kyle, CHASE.com, kchase.com. And he's got,
Yeah.
under his insights section, he's got the article that Tim and I were talking about for Charlotte multifamily housing is his looking ahead to 2024 market report. So go in there and sign up on his email list and read that document, because it's really, really well done and insightful.
Yeah, he put a lot of time into it, guys. It's a really, really good, um, it's a really good market report. And I don't, and I know it's focused on Charlotte, but I think you can apply it to some other places too, like Austin,
Oh
like
yeah.
Dallas, like Kansas City, like a
Hmm.
couple of these markets where you're seeing this oversupply headline going on right now. Compare the deliveries to what the projected growth is in the market, right? And it starts to become pretty obvious. Um, so keep that in mind, guys.
Yeah.
And here's one thing. Here's one other thing I would say. I see this as buying opportunity.
Hmm.
If somebody has the wrong view and they think this is going to be a softening that's going to last, maybe they're ready to sell. Maybe they're like, man, I can't pay because my rents aren't doing what I thought they were going to do. I'm like, well, you know what? I'll take that off your hands, because I'm going to buy it for the location and I'll sit on it. Because that's what real estate's really about. I mean,
Hmm.
location, 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 right? Like
Yeah.
can't replace location. Um,
I know we talk about, kind of turning and burning assets quickly and all the time, but there is a time and place for sitting on stuff, right? And it
mhm.
depends on the asset that you're buying, and obviously the location of it and the debt that you have. We're big fans of moving deals all the time and realizing gains and moving on to the next thing. But there will come a time where it's like, actually, I mean, there's a couple there's two of them that we own right now that it's like, this is the one I'm probably going to keep for the full 7 years or 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. We have those conversations all the time. Even as we were selling one last week, we were
Yeah.
having that
Yep.
conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, hey, Facebook user, I appreciate the comment. That's really nice of you to say that you watch our live show every week. Just try to reiterate that we try to talk about honest, open, transparent stuff. There's no fluff. It's insights into Tim and Tim's lives, into our businesses, what's going right, what's going wrong, what we're thinking about the market, how we're using this information. No, nothing's really off topic here. I mean, even we talked on taxes, we talked on like attorney stuff and asset protection. I mean, we just talk about stuff, right? That's important that we think that you guys should know, because we're either going through it ourselves or have gone through it and saw the impact or the benefit of it later on. And it's like, hey, if I had known this sooner, I would have done it sooner. So let us be that beacon of light saying, hey, this is what we're doing and why. If you haven't done this, you might want to look into it sooner than later. And also, here's why.
Yep. Hey, and one little shout out real quick. Christian, saw your episode with Chris. Really liked it, man. I like the format. You guys just sitting there in chairs, having a chat. I really liked it, man. So keep up the good work, and I'm looking forward to some new episodes coming out.
All right, guys. Well, that's all the time we got for today. Sorry for being a couple minutes late, But we will be back next Tuesday with another fun episode. So we'll see you then. Peace.
All right. See you guys.